Well, Liam, thank you very much, mate, for joining us this morning. As you mentioned just before we went live, this is the third time lucky, so we've had a few challenges kind of getting here today, but we're here, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting to know you a bit better, and I'm sure those that are listening will be as well. So, but yeah, if you could take us back to kind of where it began, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah. So I suppose where it all begins for most people is school and secondary school. I really enjoyed school. I know some people do, some people don't. Some people sort of are nonplussed by it. But I was very fortunate that I had a really good group of friends. The school was okay, state school in Hertfordshire. Nothing exceptional, but okay. But for as long as I can remember, had a real desire initially to be a pilot in the RAF. And again, I think that was through my parents taking me to air shows as a kid and seeing, the red arrows and tornadoes and all those things, thinking that'd be really, really cool. And then as I got into my teens, maybe understood what it was to be a pilot, probably acknowledged that my eyes might not have been good enough. I sort of came around to the idea potentially of could I join the army?
Okay.
Again, I was in the air cadets, so I had some very, very small amount of exposure as to sort of the military in a broader sense, and I started to sort of make those inquiries. And by the time I got to thinking about doing A levels, it was apparent to me that my state school and the sixth form, it wasn't great, and was there other options? And at the time there was somewhere called Welbeck, which is a defence sixth form college. And so I thought, okay, well, look, is there an opportunity to go there? And in going there meant that you would then ultimately, if you were accepted, you'd get a place at Sandhurst to be an officer in the army. And so I went to, and I can remember this really, really vividly. I went to the careers office in Cambridge with my dad when I was 16. I go to the top floor of this careers office, and there's this retired Colonel Parker. I'll never forget him. And I met him twice, and we talked about Welbeck. We talked about, I suppose, a bit about me and my ambitions and who I was as a person and what I wanted to do. And I can remember going back the second time and he's saying, well, I actually don't think Welbeck's for you at all. Welbeck is very structured. You do a specific set of A levels. You go to a very small number of universities to choose from, and then when you graduate, you will go to Sandhurst, but you then can only join 3 or 4 different regiments in the army. And so he said, look, from what I can see and know about you, that's probably not the right path to go down, but there is something called a sixth form scholarship, which if you are accepted, and they give out 50 a year at the time, you'd get a place at Sandhurst, but you'd have none of those constraints. So you could do whatever A levels you wanted, at whatever school you wanted, go to whatever university and do whatever degree you wanted. And he said, well, look, I think I would recommend that to be the path that you go down. So one thing led to another. You do the interviews, and then you go to somewhere called AOSB, which is the Army Officer Selection Board down in Westbury, where I suppose at 16, I mean, it's daunting if you're 26, right? But it's pretty daunting when you're 16. I'm sure the interviews and all the exercises are tailored accordingly, but nonetheless, you're asked to do sort of leadership and command tasks. You sort of do some level of sort of verbal reasoning. You've got some written tests and presentations, etc., etc. And then the culmination of that is to find out, and I was very fortunate to be awarded, as I said, one of the 56 on scholarships, which ultimately meant that when I finished my A levels, I could then go to Sandhurst and start the commissioning course. But I knew at the time that I was quite keen to go to university. I was the first one in my family to do so, but I'd heard good things, and so I chose to subsequently go to Portsmouth University and do geography. And geography, my friends just say, look, I spent a lot of time colouring in and learning about flags, which, they often say, like, geography is a degree sponsored by Crayola. But I absolutely love my subject. Absolutely. And to this day, I still love it. I could have quite easily gone into maybe a professional life that had something closer to do with geography. And I suppose I was very fortunate, Gareth, to be able to choose a degree almost purely because I really enjoyed the subject. So I didn't have to worry about, is this degree going to get me a job? Which 99% of people at university have to go, and inevitably you're often better at what you like, or you like what you're better at, and so it just it's conducive to, I think, hopefully being more successful in doing my degree. So I did that, and then went to Sandhurst. I think I graduated in June, then went to Sandhurst in the September to do the commissioning course at Sandhurst, and that's arguably probably the most formative year, and then the subsequent 3 or 4 years that I spent in the army regular, probably the most formative time of my life, because at 21, 22 years old, to be in that environment, and it's quite an intense environment for a year, and to specialise ultimately in leadership, because that's what you're aspiring to do. You're aspiring to commission as a young officer and lead soldiers in whatever guise that may look like. And then to be able to have the privilege to go on and then do that, I went into the Royal Artillery, um, and then to go and do that on exercise and an operational tour was fantastic. But to have that, ultimately that responsibility, and that autonomy to a certain extent, and that trust, to have that at 21, 22, 23, I don't think it's too lofty a statement to say it's probably the making of me, to be quite honest with you. And I feel very, very, very fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Interesting. And so the idea, it's a funny one when it comes to things like the army. The idea of it, I think when I look back, if I was younger, I would have been absolutely shit scared. And it wasn't even, not necessarily like the whole, I guess maybe like war element to it. I don't think it's not even that. It's maybe just the way my brain works. Like I struggle in really structured environments. Probably is maybe more of it, and it's maybe just the thought of it. And I don't know. And again, maybe it's just I'd never maybe really been exposed to what it would be and include and all that kind of stuff. When you were kind of already knew when you were pretty young that was the direction you were keen to take, like, had you had exposure to it? Did you know people that had been in the army? Did you know, like, what made you think, yeah, I'm keen for that?
Yeah, I don't come from a military background or a military family like lots of people. I suppose my age, we would have had grandparents that served in
Yeah.
the Second World War, but that's the extent. The exposure I suppose I got through Air Cadets again starts to give you an insight into what I suppose the military, as I said, in a broader sense is.
And Air Cadets, is that something, sorry, again, just for my ignorance, is that like a part-time thing you do, or is that when you're younger you kind of go to as like a...
Yeah, so it's like you go twice a week, and it's essentially a bit like I suppose a formalized club, if you like, but
Yeah, yeah,
specifically focusing on the Royal Air Force. So there's
right, got
Army
you.
Cadets, there's Air Cadets, and there's Sea Cadets, and you sort of you go there, and the activities that you partake, some of them are sort of general military activities, and some of them will be specific to the RAF or the Army. So as an Air Cadet, you've got the opportunity to go flying, for example,
Yeah,
as you would
yeah,
expect, and so on and so forth. So that I think that gave me a good understanding of, like, as I said, the military in a broader sense, and putting on a uniform and going to military bases and getting that exposure. And then you sort of realise they're not quite as intimidating places as you might think, and there's lots of people there having really quite a good time in their professional lives. So that's one element. I think the other element, I suppose, as I started to get a little bit older into my later teens, was recognising that I suppose what motivated me. I loved being outside. I loved and still like my exercise to this day. I love the team component. I don't think I am now, but I definitely wasn't motivated by money. So I don't think anyone joins the military is motivated by money. You're probably in the wrong place. Um, as I said, I like my sport as well, and so there's that team culture. And there's also huge opportunities, once you're in the military, whether it's adventure training to play sport, and so it just the jigsaw pieces started to fit really nicely. And if I look back now, and I don't think I gave it this much thought, but if I was to look back now and try and do that, almost that SWOT analysis on it, I can't think of another career that would better fit that moment in time and me as a
interesting.
person, both personally, I suppose, emotionally and psychologically, than that role at that time and that opportunity. And the other thing being is, even though you say you aspire to being an officer in the army or join the military in one way, shape, or form, but then within that, there's so many different organisations, different regiments, different roles within those regiments. So it's a pretty broad church, to say the least. And
Yeah,
so even though it was a big commitment at 16, um, you still had quite a lot of potential options, because at that point I hadn't decided whether I was going to go to the artillery or the Army Air Corps or the infantry or the Army Corps, for example. So while it felt like I'd chosen my path wasn't so narrow that
yeah.
it was daunting. It was actually really exciting.
So when you went to Portsmouth Uni, I think I've got a few mates that went to Portsmouth actually. So did you go and do and spend time in uni in the kind of traditional way and do like 3 or 4 years in uni and the chaos that can bring? I mean, the fun and chaos, etc.
No, absolutely. I'm a big advocate of Portsmouth. I think most people that went there to university would say they're big fans of it. I think at the time, going off on a tangent, at the time, all the universities I applied for were on the south coast. I had delusions of being some kind of like surfer, windsurfer. I could neither surf nor windsurf, and I did neither when I was there either. But I'd applied for all the universities on the south coast. Very, very happy that I chose Portsmouth and Portsmouth chose me. And yeah, it was a 3 year degree, 1 year in halls and then 2 years in house. And yeah, just had a superb time. And as I go back to the point I made earlier, that what a difference it makes when you can study something that you find really, really interesting. And
And
converse.
I think it's a really good point though, because you're absolutely right. I think certainly I would have thought more so now because I remember. I mean, I'm 39. When I went to or scraped into uni, I guess people were doing what they wanted to do. Maybe I think, but it was an eye on the role or potential role after. I think because certainly back then, I don't know if it's as much now, but I think definitely back then it was very, very important to get the degree and get that. My mum used to always call it, get that bit of paper and it will open doors. And she was actually very right. To be honest, she was correct for sure. Especially back then, I would say it's maybe slightly less important now, maybe just with the growth of social and the way people can, I guess, make money now and kind of. But what's interesting though is that those that did degrees that maybe didn't have a traditional ending of a job or a role, almost kind of went into the most random careers, didn't they? I don't know if you had mates that were in the same way, and you're like, when is that ever going to be? You know, they maybe do like something like, I had a mate that I worked with.
Photography is always a well-trodden one, isn't it?
Totally.
Not many photography graduates
Yeah.
become photographers.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm probably doing them a disservice there, but yeah.
But it's nice to hear that you were able to actually go there, enjoy it, enjoy the subject for what it was, and actually thrive in it, knowing that it didn't massively matter or impact the next stage or the first stage in their kind of career ladder.
Yeah, and again, I consider myself very fortunate that conversely, if you're very, very mindful of I need this degree because without it I can't get this job or do this career, that's quite a lot of pressure.
Of course it is.
To say the least, and how that might change your experience at university is probably or could be quite significant.
And at that age, and I think, I mean, I talk a lot about it. I was certainly not academic at all. And I just never applied myself ever. My brain just didn't work like that. I love learning now. I love developing, and I have certainly in my kind of adult life since I'm probably mid-20s. But I don't know as well if it's definitely just the way my brain works. I think as well, it took a long time to mature and want to learn certain things as well. And just the traditional teaching settings don't lend well to me at all. So, and I've got a 5-year-old son who's actually, I think, going to be much more like his mother, thankfully, and from an academic perspective. But I was very much, because of the way my brain works, I was very much going into school, and he's just finished his first year, with eyes wide open that he may be the same as me and be much more prepared. Whereas, funnily enough, both my parents were teachers, and
really, okay.
yeah, which and you can imagine how disappointed they were when they saw my results year after year. Shit. But I just couldn't apply myself. I just, for whatever reason, I just wasn't interested. But I always knew deep down, bizarrely, that it would be all right. I think, I don't know whether it was just, I don't know, work ethic or whatever. I never actually worried about it. I worried at the time because I was always more conscious about what people would think I was stupid because I couldn't pass exams and didn't really pass exams. That was the only thing I actually worried about, not what the exams meant or got me to, if that makes sense. It was a very weird one. But in terms of the army, obviously, you know, traditionally gives a lot of structure. You talked a lot about, you know, really being excited about the prospect of moving into leadership and different things. Can you walk us through some of the the things that you learn. I mean, I'm sure that you've probably got an endless list of stuff, but like some of the stuff that you learned back then that you use, today.
Yeah, there's probably lots of things even subconsciously that I don't even realise that shaped me at the time, and there's lessons learned. I think one of the biggest learnings, and it's, as I said, I'm very fortunate, or I think any junior officer is very fortunate, is to be able to be put in a position which no other civilian organisation that I can think of would do, which is you've done essentially your year's worth of basic training at Sandhurst. You might have done then some job-specific training, essentially. So if you're going to join the artillery, you're going to go and learn a bit more about that, so you understand the nature of your specific role. Then ultimately, 95% of junior officers will then get dropped in and become a troop or platoon commander for anywhere between 20, 30, and 50 men and women within your command, essentially. And those people would have been in the army anywhere from a year to 15, 20 years, of different ranks, different responsibilities, different abilities. But ultimately, you're entirely responsible for that group of people, both professionally, 100%, sometimes to an extent personally, and nothing can really. And while Sandhurst is a global centre of excellence for leadership, I think it probably acknowledges that there's certain things that they'll give you the foundational elements, but then you then need to be able to equip yourself and have the ability to adjust and adapt depending on the situations, because no one can really train you for the situations where you might be from a personal level. You've got soldiers that are going through divorces, or soldiers that have become ill, or soldiers that go to court. So there's all that side of the role, as well as the traditional leadership side of the role. But and as an officer, I think there's a percentage of what you do which is on the ground leading your soldiers in a traditional sense, which is probably what people envisage and often depicted in films. But there's a large proportion of it is where you're looking after their careers. You're there for the best interests of your soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
The motto at Sandhurst is serve to lead. Like, your mandate only exists because of those soldiers, and so that's where your leadership mandate comes from. So you're there for the betterment and to support their careers and their development. And to have that opportunity at 22 years old, and to have to navigate, okay, well, your troop sergeant should be your right-hand man or woman, but at the same time, he or she still reports into you, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that hierarchy, and managing that and having that humility. And I think that's probably a really key trait, is to understand that dynamic, how to best manage that, when to lean on people, when do you need to take a step away and go, no, actually the decision sits with me, and I'm gonna take this one. And then to have that opportunity at such an early age is what probably makes that experience as formative as what it is.
And in terms of when you're in the army, to prepare, I think some of those characteristics or skills can be, a lot of it's kind of already in you, and it's kind of cultivated over time, isn't it? It's just often who you are, like whether it's empathy, or some people are more natural leaders than others, and you see that in any walks of life. Is there anything that the army do to prepare you, or to give you more of those skills? Do they do like kind of classroom training? Do they do things that support you building those skills though over time? Especially at a young, in your early 20s, you've just come from uni.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, you haven't had to generally demonstrate too much leadership.
No, you've just got to get out of bed, get to the student union, and then get to a few classes.
To go to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, and again, the commissioning course is 44 weeks, as memory serves me, and through that time, obviously that's a build up of going through very basic entry level soldiering all the way through to hopefully what they perceive to be the finished article, in so much as after those 44 weeks. And within that, there's classroom academic work where you're using case studies of leadership and leaders, and not just in military contexts, but other ones as well. There's then the leadership on the ground, where they put you in situations that are quite challenging or quite arduous, and then they'll put you in leadership positions, and we call them command positions, where you will be responsible for your troop. So your other officer cadets, you will lead them for a period of time, and you'll go through that sort of cycle of command appointments and leadership positions in all different situations. PT as well, when you're doing things like log races and other elements, again, need a leader, need a team element. So they're constantly developing that, and I'm sure that's been something that's curated and been iterated over decades ultimately at Sandhurst. So yeah, they absolutely do. But I suppose the point being is they instill, as you mentioned, the fundamentals, but they can't give you the specifics on how you deal with individual soldiers or individual situations at individual set pieces at a time. They just have to give you and equip you with the tools. And I suppose, and that's why leadership styles is, I mean, that could be a podcast in its own right. It probably is, to be honest with you, to be able to know when actually there's certain leadership styles for situation X that wouldn't be situation, and so on and so forth. And having that ability to identify that and adjust accordingly is probably absolutely fundamental as well. Absolutely fundamental.
You are right, and I think even I guess in the kind of civilian world as well, like, you know, no matter how much leadership development training you do, or even real life scenarios, like nothing. It's kind of like going to the gym, isn't it? And putting in the work and doing the reps and stuff. The more you do it, the stronger you get, the more prepared you are for different scenarios or situations or whatever it might be, or I don't know, like doing a high rocks or something like that. But when it comes to like leadership, it's putting yourself in those situations as often as you can. So then when there's a real life one that comes up, you've probably got some muscle memory there to deal with the scenario at the time. And I think, and I think as well, like you said, it's having really kind of strong foundations and like the fundamentals in place, and probably, as I say, a lot of it's built on your character, isn't it? Like, you know, whether it be around like kindness, you know, authenticity, you know, all those different things that you can kind of lean on and say, well, I'll take this scenario as an individual situation, and then you lean on the bits that, you know, because some people, when it comes to leadership, you can be like, right, they default to being a complete asshole, and they default to being somebody that's really almost aggressive, and that, in my mind, very old school version of leading. I don't know if it's that kind of Jack Welch kind of environment where it's just like you beat people down into submission almost. And I think certainly I don't believe in that, but I also don't think that works in today's world whatsoever. I don't think companies you can get away with that anymore, thankfully. And is there anything in particular or any situations that you remember that you really struggled with when you were in the army?
I think it's probably just, it's not so much a, I don't know if I'd say it's a struggle, but you're very mindful of, as I said, striking that balance, but being seen as being fair and impartial. But you've got individuals with all different backgrounds, different ranks, different experience, different personalities. And so you want to build individual rapport and relationships to a lesser or greater degree, depending on the individuals. But at the same time, you never want to have your integrity and your leadership questioned. You don't want someone to sit there and go, well, why did you treat him like that and you're treating me like this? And so I think that's, and in any situation where you manage more than one people, there's always a risk of that happening. But at the same time, if you were to be so robotic that you treated everyone the same in every single situation, that would be absolutely wrong. And so it's developing that and finding that balance and that equilibrium. And I think that's where I'd bring trust into the equation, because ultimately, if people have the confidence and trust in you that the decisions you make and how you treat people and how you conduct yourself is in the best interest of those as individuals and as the entire group, then you're far less likely for people to question, well, why is Lieutenant Ackerman doing it like that when I'm treated like this? If you develop that rapport and that relationship, then they'll take a step back and say, okay, well, no, I understand there's a bigger picture at play, and I understand what the nuances are and why things have to be different at different times and situations. I suppose the only one of the last things I'd say, of course you get it wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be times when whether the actual fundamental of the decision was wrong or not, or just the way in which you handled that situation. And I'm sure there's times, it's probably wouldn't be right to mention specific examples, but there's of course there's times when you come out of a meeting or you've had a one-to-one, and particularly in situations maybe where they're frictious, or there's a disciplinary, or there's something that's more contentious, then yeah, absolutely, there's times when you get it wrong. As long as if you get it wrong, you can rectify it, you can acknowledge it, and if you need to do something about it, do it. Or it is a situation where this is as simple as we're learning what or how that could have been handled better next time.
Yeah.
So what's done is done, and actually there's no collateral damage, so we can move on. But recognise that next time round, if a situation like that arises or something similar, okay, well, what are you going to take from that, and what are you going to do differently so the outcome is ultimately better and improved?
Yeah.
And I think the ability to do that and do it relatively quickly is really the key. And that's again why being put in that situation at such a formative time of your life is so key, because you're given huge amounts of trust and autonomy. At its extreme, you're responsible for those people's lives.
Yeah.
And the decisions you make could determine the level of danger or the situations that you put those people in. And so what a huge amount of trust to have at 22, 23. And that, I suppose, really sharpens the mind as to, well, if you're going to lead these people, then you want to do it, and you want to do it right.
Yeah. No, 100%. And so when did you make the move, and how did you make the move into the civilian world?
Yeah. It's not just a military saying, but there's a saying definitely in the army that you're in for a good time, not a long time.
Right.
And I think is really, really appropriate. Having been in the army for 5 years, it just felt like the right time, which isn't a long time, I acknowledge, but actually what I aspired to do, what I aspired to get out of it, what I did get out of it, what I learned, what I enjoyed, who I met. I ticked so many of the boxes that I recognised that I could stay in 3 more years, I could stay in 30 more years, arguably. But actually, I felt like I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve, and I was ready to move on to the next thing. So, but at the same time, even after 5 years, there is a certain amount of, I suppose, institutionalization, if that's a word. And so you look out there, and having one thing, I suppose I was fortunate to be in a position which was I didn't have to worry ever about thinking what my job would be. All of a sudden, I found myself in a position where, okay, well, now you don't want, now you're choosing not to be in the army anymore.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I had no idea.
Leaning back into that geography degree again.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, be a geography teacher and get some stereotype and get a blazer with some elbow patches.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I'm sure I would have looked at potentially being a teacher at the time, and did quite a bit of networking. And one thing I would say is as an officer in the army, is my experience, but I'm sure it's the same in the Air Force and the Navy, is that the ex-military network is really, really strong. So whether that be for specific organisations, or whether that just be being able to meet people for a coffee and understand what they do and how they do it, is really, really strong, to say the least. So
that's excellent.
That's a big enabler for being able to put the feelers out there and start to understand. Okay, we'll start to look at certain industries and what I would and wouldn't want to do. And I ended up joining Amazon. They have a big ex-military program. I wasn't actually part of that. I ended up doing that. I was very fortunate. I got offered, I think, 2 or 3 jobs. I actually took one, and I'm not going to name the name of the organisation. Took one, declined Amazon, and within 5 days realised I'd made a complete wrong decision, and had to pick up the phone to the hiring manager at Amazon and say, look, I'm really sorry. I think I've made a massive mistake. Is there still an opportunity to have a conversation? Is the position still open? And very fortunately it was. And that's how I ended up at Amazon for 18 months.
It takes a lot though, I think, and it's probably comes from your background and probably the skills that you learned at the army to make that call though, because I know a lot of people that have probably been in that situation that have probably thought, oh fuck, I'm just going to need to ride this one out for 6 or 12 months.
Yeah.
Whereas when you knew, and you were all probably like, I don't want to make this, like you already felt that it wasn't right. Your gut probably told you this isn't going to be right, and you had the confidence and to pick up the phone and do that, which, as I say, I don't think a lot of people would have done.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably true. I think I found myself in a situation, one where you think to yourself, well, I didn't leave the army because I didn't enjoy it. It just felt like it was the right time to leave. So I've then gone into a role, and within days I'm thinking, oh my word, what have I done? Like, should I have left the army at all? First and foremost, I don't even know if going back
Was it a similar role? That obviously you don't need to name the company, but was it completely different? Okay.
In London, in an office, and it just was not me. Culturally, professionally, it just was not me. So yeah, subsequently, someone said to me, if there's any doubt, there's no doubt, which I quite like that. I use that quite a lot. But yeah, to pick up the phone to Mark, who was my boss at the time, and that 18 months was absolutely the right choice.
Yeah. And so you went into, so talk us through your first role then when you were at Amazon.
So I was an operations manager for Amazon Logistics, which is their last mile side of the business.
Yep.
So, and it is very logistics orientated. I don't have a logistics background. Most officers, I would suggest, in the army have an operational background. It's time, it's people, it's resources, and it's ultimately an objective or something that you've got to achieve. So you can take that and you can apply that to almost any operational environment. It just so happened that this one was about moving parcels from essentially the fulfillment center to your front door. And in the main, there's nothing, I suppose, on paper, there's nothing revolutionary about that. But I think we all know that when Amazon come to the party and decide to do that, they pour a load of petrol on it and they see how far they can take it. And so for me, those 18 months were an absolute whirlwind, not only to sort of transition out of the military, but just to be exposed to the world of Amazon. The metrics and the data and the analytics and the speed of which they want to iterate and test and fail and learn and adjust and go again was eye-opening, to say the least. And the pace at which they do that was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And so to be part of that, to be part of, I think at the time, everyone really now knows the same day delivery is an option. I was there and part of the team that were trialing that and rolling that out. And you can probably appreciate how challenging operationally that is when you're doing that from zero. How do you get someone who's ordered something at 10 past 10 in the morning to their front door by 9 in the afternoon? And so yeah, it was incredible. As I said, I go back to that data piece and the metrics. Often Amazon can be looked at as a retailer, if you like. Obviously, they've now got Amazon Web Services, AWS, their big data. But at their heart, they're analytical, their metrics, and their data and their focus on how they can perform is, from what I saw, is second to none. The detail in which they're prepared to go to understand their metrics was impressive and initially quite intimidating because the scrutiny that they would apply to their numbers. But yeah, a very, very impressive organisation.
I bet. I mean, I can only imagine though the schooling that must have given you into the kind of the world of business and commercial. I think it's especially coming from a structured background. It's probably really good that you went into a company that was like that had access to data and that made decisions quickly, that failed fast, like you said, pivoted to amend things, and that we're always looking at better ways to do stuff. I think probably that, I can imagine, was probably really well suited rather than going into the chaos of a startup to begin with, probably, because you can see, it would probably have been a completely other end of the scale as well. So in terms of I guess things like, I don't know, emotionally or practically, how did you find working in, civilian world? How was it difficult to adjust?
Again, whether you've been in 5 years or 35 years, there's all the other a lot of the simple things like you're living at home. I lived in an officer's mess for 4 or 5 years, so there's all those sort of day-to-day aspects that are pretty unique. I'd moved in with my wife. We pretty much got married, and then we subsequently moved in, which is a bit different as well. So you can appreciate there's some challenges and
loads of changes, yeah.
But I'm pleased to say that it all worked out in the end. I think one of the other key elements that the Amazon piece was a really nice bit at the time was there was a real team element. There was a real team element, and yes, I suppose the end goal was to ensure that all these parcels were delivered to as many people as possible, or to as many of the customers as possible, as quickly as possible. there was that team mentality and that team morale, and that made, I think that was very, very similar actually to the same kind of cohesion and mentality that you might find within a troop or platoon in the army. So I found that probably a really nice fit and a nice sort of segue across from one to the other. I'd say again probably 5 years. I'm fortunate that what to what degree I was institutionalized, I don't know, but certainly not to the extent that I would have been if I'd been in 25 years. So maybe maybe I was, rather than it feeling like I needed to change maybe what I did and how I conducted myself, it was more about just absorbing more information. Because maybe if I'd been in longer, it would have required more of a change of me personally and professionally. Whereas it was more about actually, okay, well, learning what this organization does, how does it do it, and how can I impact and affect the organization or the part of the organization that I'm responsible for to achieve the end results. And so, as I said, it was a fascinating organization. In hindsight, the ideal role coming out, because it still had that operational element. I'm still sort of hands-on. I'm still doing something. As life's subsequently gone on, I recognise that I am someone that I don't need immediate gratification, but I like to see the contribution I'm making.
Yeah.
I'm probably not someone that could work on a project that's going to deliver something in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to deliver something tomorrow, but I want to be able to see the effect I can have month on month or even week on week. And so that enabled me to do that because of the metrics and the performance of the team. And you can see from 1 week to the next the difference I was making. And I think that's really, really key.
And I guess thinking maybe about more recent roles, then is that what took you more into the kind of sales arena then? That kind of feeling.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, maybe partly that. Again, I couldn't sit and say I made those decisions consciously based on that.
Yeah.
On that requirement or that need at the time. I recognised that after 18 months at Amazon, it was time for a change. Cut a long story short, I ended up working for an organisation who specialise in the sale of sports hospitality, which is an industry I'd had no exposure to at the time, none. I think I'd been very lucky to arrange to take my soldiers to a box at Arsenal, and I managed to do that, and that was a superb experience. But up until that point, or after that point even, I did no experience with sports hospitality. But it was actually more an operational role in the first instance. It was to come in and improve the operations of what was essentially sort of a small to medium business. And their sales were in a pretty good place, but they needed to improve the operational side of things. And then over the course of almost 8 years, that started to mold more organically than anything else. There's no real deliberate or conscious decision into the commercial side of the business and building out those products and finding those products that would make the organisation more successful, and to make the organisation more successful as a sales business, in which that's exactly what it was. It was an outbound sales organisation. Well, I knew that if I could find better products, more credible products that had stronger USPs, then they'd be infinitely more sellable, and we could be more successful as a business. And over those 8 years, that's really what it culminated in doing, which is amazing industry to be in. Again, I consider myself, it's a privilege to work in sport, to say the least, and to be in that side of sport. But to go back to my previous point, but to be part of an organisation where we could be agile enough to, probably wasn't week on week, and it sometimes wasn't month on month, but you could take an event that you delivered last year, like the Monaco Grand Prix, and go, okay, well, last year we sent 50 people there, and we put some people on a grandstand, some people on a terrace, some people on a yacht. Could we go and do our own yacht next year? And I was given the autonomy and the trust to go, yeah, okay, let's try it. So the next year you'd have your own yacht, so you can start to. And that's probably the very bling, very sort of ostentatious example, but that's how quickly the business was able to sort of iterate and evolve and change over time, and see the improvements that you were making to the products and the organisation as a whole.
It sounds unbelievable. Count me in for the yacht, please.
Yeah, funny everyone says that. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet they do. And so talk us through your role then at LIV Golf. Obviously, it's a super exciting brand, and I'm sure company to be a part of.
Yeah.
You give us a bit of background, how you got involved, about just a little bit about the company as well.
So I've been there, or I've been here 6 months. So it's not a long time. So I'm still very well. I think you should always be learning, but I'm still very much in that learning phase as well. It was a recognition. I completed my MBA from Henley Business School last May, and that was the catalyst for recognising that I was probably ready to go and stretch my wings and look for a new challenge. I made no secret, Gareth, that for me the core was I needed to learn, I needed to challenge, and I needed to have an impact. They were the three key elements, and if I could find a job that satisfied those three, then I consider myself really, really lucky. Um, to your point about understanding and recognizing only in your mid-20s about how important it was for that personal and professional development and learning, doing the MBA reignited that need within me to learn and be challenged and to discover new things every day. And I think once you're in an organization for a certain period of time, or you've done a certain role for a certain period of time, it's not that easy to sit there and say, okay, well, what am I learning on a day-to-day basis? Just talking around the MBA, I remember saying to someone, it's the challenge I never knew how much I needed, because at that point I didn't realize how much I needed that learning and that exposure, which was perfectly timed. But as a result, it was as I said, the catalyst for thinking about, okay, well, look, can I go and stretch my wings and what organisations are out there? And to cut a long story short, the opportunity for LIV arose, and it appealed to me on a number of levels. Obviously, the learning, the challenge, the impact. I recognised that that would be there because of the nature of the organisation and the age in which the organisation is. The other thing, LIV had been on my radar not only because I was, because I'm in the sports industry. But I actually, going back to that, my previous role at Corinthian Sports and the autonomy I had, I actually got on a plane in October 2022 and flew out to Jeddah to try and proposition and ultimately try and connect with the people at LIV to say, could we as Corinthian Sports sell your product? Now, little did I know then that was year one. The organisation was in its infancy, and that was not the right time to have that conversation. But they'd been on my radar up until that point. The other element that I really admired was anyone that can come in and challenge the status quo, challenge the incumbent. I've got quite a lot of time for. Like him or loathe him, Elon Musk. He's gone into two of the most incumbent industries in the world, aerospace and automotive. Historically, they were dominated by some very, very big players.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get a startup off the ground even if with infinite amount of resources. And he's gone and done that. So you have to admire to be able to come in and challenge the incumbent. And what LIV's doing, not only in golf, but across the sports industry, I found incredibly impressive. And so the opportunity to contribute towards that, whether that be in a big part or a small part, was something that was particularly exciting. And so, as I said, it was the right time, the right fit, the right organisation, and so it ticked all the boxes.
Amazing. And in terms of when on LinkedIn, you talk a lot about like trust and leadership and high performance and things. Talk us through how, I guess, important that is to you, and a bit more background into that. Why is it so important?
I think I've already touched on the mandate you have as a junior officer and the huge amount of trust that you have, and I think you recognise that at the time. But again, now with hindsight looking back, it's an unbelievable amount of trust. Even after a year's worth of schooling at Sandhurst, it's a huge amount of trust. And then I suppose more recently, as I've gone through my professional career, and then as I concluded my masters and did my dissertation and specialised in trust, you don't need to scratch too far below the surface to start to recognise that it's the fundamental, not a fundamental, but in my humble opinion, the fundamental building block that both leadership and high performance is built upon, and that's any organisation. I think it's probably more well trodden when high-performing sports teams and people in the military talk about trust. I don't think necessarily commercial organisations talk about it enough. And if you take, for example, it's generally considered, I suppose, maybe in academia, that trust can be broken down into ability, integrity, and benevolence. A word that we don't often use too much, but the willingness to do good. If you think, okay, well, that's the components of trust, ability. That person needs to have the ability. They need to understand what they're doing. Integrity, I want someone to be honest, trustworthy, and benevolence. I want them to want to do good and do the right thing.
Yeah.
You then suddenly translate that across to leadership. Well, if someone asked you to define what leadership was, you could do a lot worse than say it's someone with the ability, integrity, and benevolence. And then that's that light bulb moment for me that says, wow, that's so fundamental and fascinating in equal measure, but so fundamental to the success of any organisation for that matter. And I think a lot of organisations, particularly commercial ones, can put a lot of emphasis on the trust between it and its customers. But actually, through my research, there's less focus on trust between people within the organisation. And you suddenly realise that if you've got that, you're infinitely more likely to be a successful organisation. If you haven't, you're far less likely to be a successful organisation. And so that's something I've become only probably in the last, as I said, only in the last 12 months, really, really passionate about and starting to go away and continue to do further reading and research and have conversations around that.
And I completely agree. I think I remember when we started the business, we've been going maybe 3.5+ years, and we've got a pretty close team. Most of us based in our office in Glasgow, and there's about 22 of us now, I think. And I think one of those that have kind of got to know the company well, or people I know, or people that are maybe kind of close to the business, whether it be clients or what have you, they comment a lot on the culture and the team, and the environment seems great and stuff. And the thing that that we work really, really hard to do is to build that trust internally, because we look after each other, and my obviously role as leading the company is to make sure I'm looking after everyone, and that people trust us, the direction of the business, what we're doing, the fact that we are authentic, that we are transparent, and we do that by it's just even sometimes it's the most simple things. It's like it's like sharing what's going on in the business, like the good, bad, and ugly. It's something that I'd come from a really large corporate, and there's only so much you can really share. I was in a senior leadership role there, and I think great company, but when a company's got 165,000 employees, that's pretty tough to really be, especially, I mean, I was in a senior leadership role, but I was nowhere near like the board or what have you. When it's obviously we're a small business, a young business, I think it is really important to be able to in order to build that trust, is to be open and share stuff and more. I think I've got no issue with being especially when things are hard, to be, because MD can ride the wave. When things are good, you're out celebrating, you're buying beers and all that kind of good stuff, going out for dinners with the team and all that. That MD can ride that wave, right? But it's when things are hard, and there are especially for small companies, and with maybe that we don't have endless resources, of course. So it's got to. There are times where things get hard, cash flow gets tight, and all that kind of stuff. And I think we have just tried really hard to bring everybody into that. And look, it's never to be a poor us story to the team. It's more, well, look, this is what's happening here, good or bad, and this is kind of what we're going through. This is what we're doing about it and stuff. Obviously, you work for a much larger organisation. Is there anything like tactically that you do to build that kind of trust with your teams and your clients, or well, actually not even clients, sorry, internally? Is there anything in particular that you guys do that some other people could maybe adopt, and probably it's come, I would imagine, from your years in the army and perhaps Amazon as well?
Thing that I've witnessed that I think LIV credit where credit's due, what they do particularly well. And in any organisation I've been part of, it makes a real difference. It's that communication, that internal communication, to make sure that the business or the entire organisation, whether that be whatever organisation that is for that matter, is if you can share as much information as possible. There's that cliche, isn't it? You can't over communicate, and it's so true. And conversely, often the failings of organisations are where that communication breaks down, or there's not enough of it. And I think, like to your point around when you've got an organisation that has tens, hundreds, even hundreds of thousands of people, you can't be completely transparent, because it wouldn't be appropriate at times to do that. But I would say if you're going to win more than you lose if you overshare.
Yeah.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah.
I definitely think you'll win more than you lose if you overshare. Because as I said, the opposite of that is just handing out small bits of information every now and then. And well, if you go back to the trust piece, that does not build or contribute to a trusting environment. And so any organisation that can over communicate and keep people really, really well informed. And again, to your point, it's easy when the message is really good and really positive, or easier, and it's more welcome sometimes. Often you don't want to necessarily disseminate the news that isn't as positive or negative, or is going to have implications further down the line. But again, if you've got that consistency of transparency and communication, then good, bad, or indifferent, that should be shared. And I know, having been on the receiving end of those situations, irrespective of what that communication says, you absolutely welcome that transparency and that openness, and it makes you buy into and have a greater affinity and commitment with that organisation, because you recognise, wow, they're sharing all that information. They're not holding anything back, that they really should be sharing. And I think that's key. It sounds very simplistic, just communication, but I think that's really key.
Simplistic is often, if not always, the answer, isn't it? Like, MD can make something difficult, but it's only a certain few that can make it even more simple. Mm-hmm. I think there's two different things that I think about there. Is like when you communicate with your team clearly and you share everything that's going on well and what's going good and what's not going so good. The good thing as well is, like, when you've got it's your team, so you can often as well, people will then come up with potential solutions that you might not have thought of, because your head was so in the in the sand, or just so laser focused on something, you've not come up above the weeds and looked around for that, for something that could solve for it. So I think it's having then that trust to do that your team could actually also come with solves, and it's not all for the person at the top to come with. And it rarely is. I mean, rarely am I the person that comes up with all the answers, or if ever. I'm fortunate in that sense that the team are excellent. And I think, like, the downside as well, would have seen it really backfire for companies when communication is poor and people aren't transparent, is that's when the rumour mill starts. That's when people start to assume things, or think things, or over worry, or think about, fuck, the whole thing's gone, like we need to all look for new jobs, or whatever it might be. Whereas actually it could have just been a really open, transparent session. Like, one of the things we try to do actually at ORRJO is we'll try and get out of the office as well. So say it's been a bit of a stressy week or a stressy month or whatever, which just happened, right? We try to get out, and we go out, and it's not always centred around going out for a swally. It's often around maybe going out for like a team walk and grabbing coffee and getting out the office, getting some fresh air, because you know yourself, if you're ever feeling a bit stressed or a bit worried about stuff or whatever, movement is always the way, isn't it? It's never sitting in a room thinking about where's my solution. It's like, let's go out for a walk, let's hit the gym, lift some weights, or whatever it might be, is how you start to then think, fuck, right, I can deal with this, I can break this into manageable chunks. And actually, it's not such a scary thing after all. This can be or speaking to people.
Yeah, and I think the last piece I'd say on the communication point is when people reciprocate that.
Yeah.
Generally, if you're in a leadership position, and you set the tone around communications and transparency and openness and sharing information when you've got it, that it'd be remarkable if the majority of your team didn't reciprocate that. And as a leader, that's what you want. You don't want it to be getting blood out the stone. You don't want to have people in your team that feel they can't share and be open. And again, there'll be certain things they'll be prepared to share with you, and there's certain things that they won't, and that will depend on the individual, and that's okay. But what you don't want is people feeling, oh, there's not a culture of openness and transparency, and actually, I'm going to hold that in. Whereas if you've got a team that are prepared, whether they want to do that in an open forum, when you're going out for coffees as a team, or at the bar, or in a meeting, or in a more closed forum when it's got a one-to-one, then I think as a leader, again, in my experience, the times when you can sit there and be relatively satisfied that you're leading people in the right way, of the right purpose, is their willingness to be open and honest with you, because that demonstrates that they trust you. And as I said, that's, for me as a leader, that's foundation. So if they're sitting opposite you and being open and really honest and transparent, well, then they trust me. And if they trust me, then I've got that ability, I've got that integrity, and I've got that benevolence. Tick, tick, tick. Okay, well, I must be doing something right. That's not to inflate your ego, but it's also to recognise, okay, well, I've been able to build trust with this person, and then recognise, have I got that with the rest of the team? If I have, great. If I haven't, what do I need to do for the team or for individuals? And so I think it plays into that element as well of leadership.
Yeah, no, that's good. And one of the things, I guess, that one of the purposes for this podcast is to help people that are a little bit younger, maybe kind of early teens, or not early teens, sorry, late teens, early 20s, help them kind of get on. And one of the things I thought would be really interesting is, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the situation you were at when you were in the army, and you were thought, right, this has come to probably its natural end here. You're kind of looking at options. You're not sure exactly what direction to turn. Is there any specific advice you would give to someone that is maybe thinking, look, in the next 6 to 12 months, I'd probably be quite like to do something different and maybe go into the civilian world or whatever that might be. Yeah. And they'll probably be looking at somebody like yourself that's been, that's taken that leap, that's been super successful, now working with for an amazing organisation and brand, and a really senior role. Like, is there any particular advice you'd give to somebody that's looking at your experience?
Yeah, no, look, that's a good question, and thank you. That's very kind. I think, and not just from a military transition, but even if it's coming out of university or leaving A levels, I think the starting point would be find that next role that you've got some element of passion in or around, and whether that's the industry, but I'll come back to why you've got to be mindful of that in just a second, or whether it's the role itself. So if it's an operational role, because you get kicked from seeing something or making something happen in a relatively short space of time. Because I think if you've got enough of that in whatever role it is, you'll be far more likely to be successful at it. You're definitely more likely to enjoy it, and and I think the probability of that setting the conditions to then go on to doing whatever it may be next, I think it would be far more positive. That's not to say that initial role has to be the one that is on a very linear, well, I'm going to do that job, and that gets me to this job, and then that gets me to that job. I would say your first role is the one that really taps into that passion. The reason I caveat around the industry is, I think you've just got to be really mindful that if you go, and sport, I think is a really good example of this, where obviously a huge amount of people would love to be involved in sport, but to be involved in sport, as I said, is a privilege, but it's probably not enough to get you out of bed in the morning. Like, what's your actual role? What are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis? Because that's the thing that you need to have the passion in. This then becomes a privilege that you can do that role within an industry you like. But it might be that your first role isn't one in the industry that particularly turns you on, but will set the conditions for something going forward. But just to reiterate that second point, it's easy to say sat here now, I suppose, and much harder when you're 21, 22. I wouldn't try to map it out too strategically. Absolutely have goals and ambitions and somewhere you want to get to, but I wouldn't try and overly map it out and be wedded to it, because I think there's more opportunities and more variety, and things will come your way, and you might be you might be disappointed if you turn a blind eye to certain things because you've got this one pinnacle nirvana place that you want to get to, and unless it's directly supporting that objective,
yeah,
we can look at it. So I
yeah.
suppose that best way of saying it is just be really open-minded. But I come back to at its heart, try and find something that you've got a passion in or for. Start there, and I think that'll set the conditions.
And how do you define passion?
Something that excites you, something that when you're not having such a good day or when the situation isn't as positive as you would like, you've still got the resilience to go,
Yeah,
no, I'll continue to move forward. I'm not giving up on this one. Whereas, and I think that's not to say you can't do that if you haven't got a passion for it, but it's infinitely more easier if you have. And so with that excitement and that ability to go, you know what, when the chips are down, we'll have the resilience to keep pushing on. Yeah. And then I'd say that's what roughly defines what having a passion for it is.
yeah. No, I know it's right, and I think it's. I do agree with you can't have like one set fixed outcome that's in your mind, because I think life will throw you spanners, and things will change direction, and if you've only got that one thing in your sights, then you're going to probably be disappointed and in some way, shape or form, when you actually probably don't have to be. I think you're right. I think it's finding something that you're really interested in, trying lots of different things, finding what you're good at as well. Because also as well, I think, in my opinion, like, a lot of people can be like, oh, I love doing that, but you're like, yeah, but you're fucking terrible at it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it could be like, it could, for me, it could, funnily enough, it could be golf, right? I mean, I could really, like, I enjoy playing golf only when I hit the ball well. Most of the time I don't. So 95% of the time I do not enjoy playing golf because I hit the ball so poorly.
Yeah.
So if I thought, right, I really want to be a golfer, I'm probably in for the rest of my life being pretty unhappy. 95% of the time, and I'd probably make zero money. But no, I think it's right, and I think it's, life isn't just linear, is it? It's good. There's going to be curves, there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be challenges that you've got to be able to deal with. And so if you look back at, like, a pretty interesting life and career so far, is there anything that you would do differently, or is there any advice that you would give your younger self, kind of looking back now with the benefit of hindsight?
I'm pleased to sit here now and say I don't really have any regrets. So again, that I think I'm very fortunate to be able to say that. I would say since moving, and this isn't as applicable in the military, but since moving into commercial organisations, I think, anyway, in my humble opinion, something that set me in good stead is in treating the organisations I work for as if they were my own.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
therefore making decisions as if they were your own businesses, and thinking about them and working or having a work ethic as if they were your own businesses.
Yeah.
And that resonates particularly with my time at Corinthian. Now, maybe that's slightly easier for when you work for a small to medium business than it is a slightly larger organisation. But I still think that said, within those large organisations, you'll be within teams, and it can be treating that team as if it's your own business rather than the whole organisation. And anyone that I manage and lead, I'd always give them that advice, because I think you can't go far wrong. You can't go far wrong from as I said, from a work ethic point of view. You won't go far wrong from making decisions. 9 times out of 10, you'll call it right, because if you're treating it as if it's your own business, chances are you'll make the right decision about it. You'll approach things accordingly, you'll manage your time, and you'll look for those areas of professional and personal development that directly contribute to the success of that team and organisation, as if you would if it was your own business. And so that would probably be hard to do at times, and particularly difficult, I would suggest, if you're in a role where you don't have an affinity with that organisation, or you don't have an affinity with that team. That's probably going to be quite challenging. If you can find an organisation that you do have an affinity with, then if you can try and approach it as if it was your own business and you were leading it, how would you behave and conduct yourself?
And I think I agree. I think what they often say is, like, you can be entrepreneurial within an organisation. Like, you don't have to be to run your own business specifically to be entrepreneurial at all. And I think having some of those entrepreneurial characteristics within a business, even if it's a excuse me, a big business, it's actually really important. There's obviously, you need to know when to stop pushing so hard on certain things. Like there is lines, and I think, you know, that you'll, I'm sure, be very respectful of like chain of command and all that kind of good stuff from your experience, which is good. That was one of the bits that I struggled a little bit with, I have to say, as I kind of got into more senior roles, because I challenged the status quo a lot. But to be honest, though, always in a respectful way, not as an asshole. It was always because I thought there genuinely would have been a better way to do it. And I think depending who is a kind of leading you and stuff like that, as long as it's done in a respectful way and you're not trying to just be a fucking asshole and cause problems for a business or a person, then usually it's met with you know, understanding, reason, maybe the openness to try something.
The people that you're reporting into aren't receptive of that, and the difference that can make. But certainly, I would set my stall out from the outset. Come to me if you don't think I'm right, or you think there's a better way of doing it. Please do challenge me. As you said, do it in a professional manner. I think, and again, it goes back to, because if you're all pulling in the same direction, then you know the person's doing that not because they want to undermine you, not because they just want their voice heard, but they want to do it for the betterment of the team and the organisation.
100%.
And that's the kind of team ethic and culture you want to, or I certainly would like to curate, which is one where people go, no, I think there's a better way to do it, which will only infinitely improve the results of the performance of the team.
No, I think it's exactly that, and it's I think as well, if some people will probably find themselves maybe in roles that they're not able to do that, and that's probably what, and if they're that way inclined, that they do like to try and come up with ideas in a good way, and also their ideas have like they've got balance to them, right? They don't just think they're always right, and because that often becomes just troublemakers, in my opinion, right? But actually what they suggest and what they do, even if they've not been listened to, but they're actually well thought out and they're well thought through, and they've seek counsel from other people within the team to make sure that they are on the right path. And if that is met with you know, pushback from those above, perhaps there's just maybe not the right alignment there between yourself and your senior leadership team, and that's okay. But probably to stop yourself driving yourself mad, the best thing is to do is maybe to look for another option or another opportunity. If you've kind of bottomed that out, I think, as well, because that can be a difficult environment, I guess, if you're also working for organisations when you're met with a lot of resistance on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. And in terms of, obviously, development's clearly been a big thing for yourself, you know, early in your life, but also, you know, completing the MBA last year, which is great. Kind of closing out today's chat, I'm keen to understand a little bit more about what do you do in your own time to develop, because I think that's a huge thing as well for those that are listening, is like, this isn't on LIV's time or on the business or company you work for. Like, what are you doing in your own time to develop and to make yourself the best possible salesperson or leader that you can be?
I think there's that sort of mental and physical component. I think the physical component for me, and I think for everyone, just sometimes to a lesser or greater degree, but the physical component for me is massive. It's getting outside, it's doing something. I know I'm professionally and personally, I'm better if I do something, if I can't do it on a daily basis, but to try and do that, that's something that's, if I was to have one vice, that's probably it. Do some form of exercise. I just think it's a really good thing for me to do, and as I said, I can't think of a reason why that wouldn't be applicable for almost everyone in any organisation. That professional development, I think certainly now it's looking and going a little bit deeper on that trust element, and really trying to understand that, and specifically understand that maybe in sports organisations and sports teams, and how that's applicable is something that I'm going to go away and spend some time doing. Separately, I do read. I love to read.
Nice.
But almost, I'd say, maybe every fifth book is a work or professional type book.
Right.
The other four are generally always non-fiction, either about travelling, about expeditions, about someone doing something, cycling the length of Africa.
Nice.
that's what I like to read and switch off. Travel, I think, is a huge component. If you're fortunate enough to be able to travel, I think in my humble opinion, it's the best thing you can spend your money on personally. Go and broaden your mind, go and see how other people live. I think it's, again, in my humble opinion, it's a very, very good way of having a reality check. When you come back to personal life or professional life and just having that perspective on, this is important, but it's not quite as important, or
it's not everything.
It's not everything. And just remember, when you think you're having a bad day, just remember the situation you saw 3 weeks ago. You're not having a bad day. Millions of people would love to be sat in the position you're in right now, and have that perspective for me is one of the most important things I've been able to very fortunately have over the last 15 years. Exercise, travel, read, but don't read too much about your work, I would suggest. And then the trust component is sort of reinvigorated, I'd say, over the last year, but then recently over the last 8 weeks, it sort of reinvigorated that appetite to go and dig a little bit deeper on a very specific topic, because I can see, as I said, how fundamental it is to not, it won't just be fundamental to me and my career, but it's fundamental to every human relationship and every organisation.
And finally, where would you recommend from a travel destination to go to that you've been to that I should definitely go to?
That's really good. That's really, really good.
Bear in mind, I hate spiders and snakes, so...
Not South Africa then. Not that we saw too many. Anywhere in South America. It doesn't seem to be that well trodden a path for people in the UK, but anywhere in South America, I think was superb. What an incredible place. Whether that be Brazil, Chile, South America, but it sounds like you've ticked a few off there, but there's still a few more to go.
For sure. The only thing, because I actually hate flying.
A long boat trip.
Look, Liam, I appreciate your time this morning, mate. As I say, third time lucky we got there in the end. Let's keep in touch. I'm definitely keen to take the team to one of your LIV events. That'd be unbelievable. So let's catch up properly afterwards, and we'll get something in the diary.
No, look, pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.